Have you ever wondered how psychologists actually figure out what makes people tick? You know, how they take a real-life problem and turn it into a clear understanding? Well, today, we're cracking open the toolbox they use to describe and ultimately understand human behavior. And to make all this feel, real, we're going to follow the story of a young vocalist named Ciera. Her journey is going to be our guide as we explore some of these really powerful research tools. All right, so meet Ciera. You've got to picture her. She's the star vocalist of her school choir. We're talking confident, celebrated, totally at the top of her game. When she gets up to sing, everybody listens. And then it happened. That one moment that every single performer has nightmares about. Right in the middle of a huge solo, the words, they just poof, gone. A single super public moment of just blanking. And that one moment, it completely rewired everything for her. The joy she used to feel performing, it's gone. Now it's just this deep, physical fear. I mean, even just thinking about singing a solo makes her start shaking and break out in a cold sweat. And the story she's telling herself, it's brutal. She's thinking, I just isn't good enough anymore. It's not just about being scared anymore. She truly believes she's lost it, that something is fundamentally wrong with her. So here's the big question, right? If you're a psychologist, you see the problem, you see the pain. But where do you even start? How would you begin to unpack this whole tangled mess of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? Okay, so before you can pick a tool from that toolbox, you first have to decide what kind of information you're even looking for. And it turns out, all the information you can gather, all the data, it really just falls into two big buckets. On one side, you've got quantitative data. Just think Q for quantity. This is all about the numbers. Scores on a test, statistics, anything you can measure. Then, on the other side, you have qualitative data. Think Q for quality. This is the descriptive stuff, the stories, interviews, observations. So quantitative tells you how many and how much. Qualitative, that tells you the how and the why. All right, let's dive into the first set of tools, the ones for gathering those hard numbers. These are your quantitative methods, and they're all about finding patterns with some serious precision. A classic go-to tool here is the survey. You know, it seems simple enough, right? Ask a bunch of people the same questions to get a snapshot of what they think or do. But, and this is a big but, getting good data from a survey, way trickier than it looks. One of the most common tools you'll see inside a survey is something called a Likert scale. Instead of a simple yes or no, it lets you measure the degree of something. So for Ciera, we could ask her to rate a statement like, I feel confident in my ability to succeed. Suddenly, her feeling becomes a number, and you can track that number, you can compare it, it's super useful. Okay, but here's one of the biggest traps with surveys. It's called the wording effect, and it's this idea that just a tiny, subtle change in how you phrase a question can completely change the answers you get. It's a huge potential source of bias. Just look at this. Asking a student, do you feel stressed about your upcoming exams? Okay, that's one thing. But what if you ask, are you worried about failing your upcoming exams? See the difference? That word, failing, is so much more loaded. It triggers a totally different, more specific fear. You're going to get a very different set of answers, even though you're trying to ask about the same general feeling. And here's another big survey pitfall. It's called social desirability bias. And honestly, it's just human nature. We all want to look good, right? So when someone asks us a question, instead of giving the 100% honest answer, we sometimes give the answer that we think will make us sound better or more, socially acceptable. And here is the perfect, maybe slightly cheeky example to make this crystal clear. Imagine a survey asks you straight up, do you pee in the shower? Now, even if you do, there's a pretty good chance you're going to check no, right? Because you don't want to be judged. That is social desirability bias in a nutshell. It's that pressure to give the right answer, not the true one. Okay, so we've talked about the numbers. Now let's shift gears and look at the qualitative methods. These tools aren't about counting things. They're about capturing the rich, messy, detailed stories behind why we do what we do. First up, we have naturalistic observation. And yeah, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Researchers go out into the real world, a school cafeteria, a park, Ciera's choir rehearsal, and they just watch. They observe and record behavior as it naturally happens without getting involved at all. The whole point is to see how people genuinely act. But this isn't just like casual people watching, it's super systematic. Researchers are using things like tally counts to track how many times a certain behavior happens. They're writing these incredibly detailed observer narratives, or maybe even using audio or video so they can analyze it all later. It's all about finding real, meaningful patterns in that natural behavior. So if observation is about looking broadly at a group, the case study is the exact opposite. It goes deep. This is the ultimate deep dive, where you focus intensely on just one single person, or maybe one group or event, to understand it in just incredible detail. And you can really see the power of a case study when you look at the famous and tragic story of Jeannie. She was discovered after being kept in extreme isolation for 13 years. Now, that's a situation that you could never, ever ethically replicate in a lab. By studying her single, unique case, researchers gained these invaluable insights into how the human brain works, especially when it comes to that critical period we have for learning language. Okay, so we have our tools. We've got the quantitative, numbers-based methods, and the qualitative, story-based methods. Let's bring this all back home. Let's go back to Ciera and see how we could actually use these tools to start solving her puzzle. So how could we actually study Ciera? Well, we could start with the quantitative stuff, right? Give her a survey with a Likert scale to get a number, a baseline for her anxiety level. But that number only tells us so much. So next, we could use naturalistic observation. We could go to her choir rehearsal and just watch. What does her body language look like when a solo comes up? And then, to get the whole picture, we do a case study. Sit down with her for in-depth interviews. Talk about her history, her feelings, her inner world. You see how each tool gives us a totally different but totally essential piece of the puzzle? And this really gets to the most important takeaway. There's no single best method. There's no magic bullet. A survey is awesome for getting big picture numbers from lots of people, but it's never going to give you the deep personal story that a case study can. Observation shows you what people actually do, which can be very different from what they say they do. A really skilled researcher knows that the secret isn't finding the one best tool. It's about picking the right tool for the specific question they're trying to answer. So now I'm turning the question over to you. You've seen the toolbox. If you were the psychologist trying to help Ciera, where would you start? Which tool would you pick up first, and what would you be hoping to find? Think about it, because your answer says a lot about how you'd approach solving any kind of complex human problem.